The Operator Log, Episode 8, What We've Learned. Building in Public, the Arco Log. Most companies publish to attract attention. Arco publishes to create a record. Last week, we covered the studio model, why infrastructure drag traps the founder-led autonomous build, and why the agentic core is the structural response. The preview at the end of that episode promised something different this week, building in public, what that transparency produces, and what it costs. This is also the first episode in a different editorial register. 7 episodes in, we have been in how we think and what we observe territory, frameworks, and market analysis. This episode is what we've learned. The distinction matters in delivery. Less external evidence, more first-person operational account. An internal memo that became public rather than a market report. The subject is the Arco log itself, the blog, the lexicon, this podcast, not as a content strategy, not as a marketing play, as a specific operational decision with specific operational consequences. Most companies publish to attract attention. Arco publishes to create a record. Those are not two approaches to the same goal. They are different goals entirely, and the difference determines who reads what we write, why they read it, and what it produces beyond impressions. This is the operator log. The default model for company publishing is algorithm-driven. Frequency over depth, volume over insight, topics selected for search intent rather than operational relevance. The publishing calendar determines what gets written, and the publishing calendar is set by the marketing function rather than by what the work is actually producing. The result is content that exists to satisfy a platform, regular, optimized, and largely interchangeable with what every other company in the same category is producing. Arco's position on this is not philosophical. It is operational. Content produced to satisfy a calendar is content that cannot be trusted. It signals that the publisher is optimizing for visibility rather than for record. And a record that cannot be trusted is not a record. It is a brand asset. Those are different things with different uses. The low-noise editorial policy is the operational constraint that separates what we publish from that model. The rule is simple. Nothing gets published without architectural significance. Not a threshold of quality, a threshold of substance. If a memo does not define a mechanism Arco uses, document a problem Arco has encountered, or record an operational finding that changes how we build, it does not publish. The consequence is variable cadence. Some weeks produce 1 memo, some produce 3, some produce none. The calendar does not govern the output, the work does. That variability is not a production failure. It is evidence that the policy is holding. A publishing schedule that never misses is a publishing schedule that is being fed by filler. Arco does not publish filler. The 3 audiences this discipline serves are specific and non-overlapping. The first is operators, people who are building or managing autonomous businesses and want a reference architecture grounded in operational reality rather than in theory or trend. The 7 episodes preceding this one are written for that audience. The definitions, the frameworks, the failure modes, the metrics, all of it is material that an operator can apply directly because it comes from operational practice rather than from modeled prediction. The second audience is institutional investors, not retail investors looking for investment ideas, institutional partners evaluating agentic company structures for their portfolio. That audience requires something specific from a publishing record, evidence of structural integrity, not growth projections, not market size estimates, evidence that the companies being built are engineered with sufficient rigor that their operational behavior is predictable and their yield profile is stable. Trend commentary does not provide that evidence. Precise operational documentation does. The third audience is potential acquirers. This is the audience that most company blogs never consider at all, and the one for whom the low noise policy matters most. An acquirer does not read a company blog for brand familiarity. They read it, if it is worth reading, as the beginning of due diligence. They want to know how the business was built, what broke, how the architecture responded, and whether the people who built it understood what they were doing well enough to document it at the level of precision that acquisition scrutiny requires. A publishing record that meets that standard is not a marketing asset. It is pre-acquisition infrastructure. Pundits write for attention. Operators write for the record. When most founders think about transparency, they think about brand. Being open about the journey builds trust, attracts early adopters, and humanizes the company. That is a reasonable argument for a consumer product in a speculative market. It is not the argument Arco is making. Arco's transparency is structural. It serves a specific function at a specific moment in the life cycle of each business we build. Acquisition. The Arco log is pre-acquisition documentation. Every memo published is evidence that will be reviewed during due diligence, not retrospectively assembled under time pressure, but built progressively into the public record as the business develops. Most acquisitions stall on due diligence because the target cannot explain how the business actually works. The acquirer opens the data room and finds financial statements, customer contracts, and a slide deck that describes the product. What they do not find is a clear account of how the architecture was designed, which failure modes were encountered and resolved, how the stewardship model evolved as the business scaled, and what operational decisions were made in response to real data versus what was planned at the outset. Without that account, the acquirer is buying a black box. Black boxes attract risk premiums. Risk premiums reduce valuations. The reduction in informational asymmetry that precise operational documentation provides is a structural advantage at exit, faster due diligence, higher acquirer confidence, and a valuation that reflects what the business actually is rather than what it might be. An Arco business that has been documented through the log for 2 or 3 years before a potential acquisition is not a black box. The acquirer has access to the architectural decisions that produced the current system, the failure modes that tested it, the stewardship protocols that maintain it, and the performance metrics, architectural certainty, MTTI, operational drag, that confirm it is running as designed. That is not marketing. That is the technical manual for the infrastructure they are considering purchasing. The failure documentation argument is the one that surprises people most. We document failures with the same precision as successes, not as a confession, as a proof of operational honesty. An agentic system that appears in the log with an unblemished record has not been documented honestly. Every autonomous build encounters failure modes, tier boundaries that were drawn incorrectly and had to be moved, exception handling protocols that were insufficient for a class of inputs the architecture was not designed to process, agent architectures that reached their ceiling before architectural certainty was achieved and required redesign. These are not embarrassments. They are evidence that the system was operated under real conditions and that the team building it understood what they were seeing well enough to document it. An acquirer who reads a failure mode documented with precision, the condition that triggered it, the system response, the architectural change that resolved it, the evidence that the resolution held, is reading something more valuable than a success story. They are reading proof that the operational intelligence of the business is real. A suspiciously clean success record raises questions. A precisely documented failure record answers them. The memos compound in value in a specific direction over time. The early ones, the definitions of what autonomous means, the case for not building MVPs, the market selection framework, the studio model, are the philosophical foundation. They establish the architecture of thinking before the architecture of building. The later ones are operational proof, not that autonomous business design is theoretically superior, but that Arco builds it, runs it, and documents it at the level of rigor that an institutional partner requires to trust. Together, they form a coherent evidentiary body. The foundation gives the proof its context. The proof gives the foundation its credibility. The most common concern about publishing operational logic in public is competitive intelligence. If Arco documents how it selects markets, how the agentic core is structured, how the stewardship model operates, does that not hand competitors the blueprint? The answer requires a precise understanding of where the moat actually is. The operational knowledge documented in the log is not the competitive advantage. The Arco moat is the agentic core, the accumulated technical and operational infrastructure built through each successive deployment, tested against real failure data, calibrated by real operational conditions, and improved by every edge case every live business has produced. That cannot be read into existence. A competitor who reads every memo in the log understands the principles. They still need to build the agent orchestration layer, deploy it in a proven market, resolve the failure modes under live operational conditions, develop the stewardship capability through actual practice, and reach architectural certainty in a business that is generating real revenue. None of that is solved by reading. The gap between understanding the framework and having built it across multiple deployments is measured in years and in the specific operational knowledge that only accumulates through doing the work. What the log does attract is the right people, operators who are already building at this level and want a reference architecture grounded in practice rather than theory. Investors who understand what agentic company structures are and want to evaluate one that documents its own operational behavior. Partners who are capable of contributing to the agentic core rather than requiring it to be explained from the beginning. The log filters for that audience. Most people who read it will not become competitors. They will become operators, investors, or collaborators, which is precisely the outcome the publication is designed to produce. There is a distinction worth drawing between what Arco does and what the broader building in public tradition usually means. Most practitioners who build in public are doing so as a market-finding exercise. They share their journey, document their experiments, solicit feedback from the community, and iterate toward a product that the audience validates. That is a legitimate approach in a speculative market where the demand is uncertain and the product needs to find its shape through public exposure. Arco does not enter speculative markets. There is no market-finding journey to document because the market is validated before building begins. We are not asking for feedback. We are providing proof. The distinction between those two modes is the same distinction we drew in episode 4 between the MVP model and the Arco model. Building in public as iteration is what founders do in speculative markets. Building in public as record is what operators do in proven ones. The same logic that governs our engineering approach governs our publishing approach. We do not publish to find out what works. We publish to document what does. This podcast is part of that structure. The operator log is the audio layer of the Arco log, the spoken companion to each written memo, built on the same discipline. No episode publishes without architectural significance. Each one corresponds to a written memo that stands independently. The podcast does not exist to attract subscribers. It exists to extend the reach of the record to the operator who learns on a commute, the investor who consumes long-form content in parallel work, the potential acquirer who wants to understand how Arco thinks before they read the data room. The platform is different. The purpose is the same. The industry is saturated with a commentary on what agentic AI might do. Arco publishes only what agentic systems actually do. In production, under load, in the markets where the coordination tax has made the incumbents structurally vulnerable. That distinction is not a content strategy. It is a claim about what kind of operator Arco is. Every memo either proves the claim or fails to. The log is the test we set for ourselves in public because public accountability is the only kind that compounds. What is the Arco log and who is it written for? The Arco log is a public record of the architectural decisions, operational findings, and failure modes that arise from building and running autonomous businesses. It is published under a low noise editorial policy. Nothing publishes without architectural significance, and the cadence follows what the work produces rather than a publishing calendar. The log is written for three audiences: operators, building autonomous businesses who want a reference architecture grounded in operational practice; institutional investors, evaluating the structural integrity of agentic company models; and potential acquirers, conducting pre-acquisition due diligence on Arco portfolio companies. It is pre-acquisition documentation, not brand content. Here is the verdict on building in public. Most companies publish to attract attention. The metric is impressions, followers, share of voice in a category that is being contested by everyone in the market at the same time. The output is content that looks like every other company's content because it is optimized for the same algorithm against the same audience with the same goal. Arco publishes to create a record. The metric is architectural significance. The output is documentation that an operator can apply, an investor can evaluate, and an acquirer can interrogate. Those are harder standards to meet, which is why the cadence is variable and why some weeks produce nothing. The constraint is not frequency, it is integrity. The agentic era will not be won by those who can articulate the most compelling vision of what AI might do. It will be won by those who can document what agentic systems actually do, in production, under load, in the markets where the coordination tax has made the incumbents structurally vulnerable. Vision is cheap. Operational proof is not. The log is the operational proof. The full written version of this argument is memo number 8, Building in Public, on the blog at arcoventure.studio. The Arco lexicon at arcoventure.studio/lexicon defines every term introduced across this 8-episode arc. Next week, what actually breaks in autonomous systems, the three failure modes that every agentic build encounters, and how the architecture is designed to surface and resolve them. We are not building a media brand. We are building a record. This has been episode 8 of the Operator Log.